Matt Daniels, welcome to the Running Lawn podcast.
Hey, Fran, how's it going, man? Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's been a long time since I wanted to have you on this podcast because there's definitely been a lots of chances to meet this year. I mean, we met in Bellingham, Washington for Chuckanut. Then I stayed at your apartment in Boulder for a couple of weeks, and then we met in Sierre in Chamonix. So at least four places. So
Yeah,
it's pretty good. And yeah, I think it's finally time to connect on the podcast.
definitely, man. I appreciate it. You having me on and everything. It was a fun year getting to see you all around the world and have you come here in Boulder, to my hometown and stay with me. That was an extra treat, and yeah, getting to share some races and runs with you. Although you were far ahead of me in most of them, it was a good time, man.
I mean, checking out you were super close, and I mean we'll talk about checking out later because it's a memory that I want to bring back because I think the race was pretty meaningful for both. But first I wanted to start with just how you're doing, and I think you're tapering for Javelina. Um, that is coming up next week. So like, just how do you feel, and how's this training block been for you?
Yeah. Javelina's coming up a week from Saturday, so yeah, it's been a good block. I've made some changes with kind of coaching and just my mindset again. I think that's one thing as runners we are always evolving, and our minds and all that are always evolving to try and like get the most out of ourselves for whatever race we're training for. And Javelina is a special one. It's a 100-mile race, and I've right off the bat in my ultra running career, I had success at the 100-mile distance at Western States, and then since then, I just haven't really been able to nail it. And so I've tried to make the changes going into this block to hopefully go into this race with a little bit of a more of a relaxed mindset and respect the distance, I think, and that's shown in training where I haven't like I think typical 100-mile blocks. I'll just really send it in training and put in a ton of volume and think that that's what I need to be doing, and I'll stress myself out over who's in the race and what the tactics are going to be like. And this time around, I think I've kind of kept things more simple and more the same. I mean, I've had a pretty decent year of minus a couple of races, a pretty decent year of racing and staying injury free and healthy. And so uh, I kind of just went with that again. This training block was a little bit more of a condensed block, but yeah, it's been good. I think the big thing is just not putting pressure on myself or stress, and just kind of letting this race be what it is. And with the idea of like I really want to complete this one, like I want to finish it, and I want it to be a good experience. And if I end up in fifth, eighth, 10th place, fine. If I end up first or second, hey, that's great. So that's kind of where I'm at, and I'm looking forward to getting out there and having a party in the desert.
Awesome. And I think it's great that you have the motivation to go back after last year's DNF. I think it was last year.
Yeah, last two
So
years.
yeah, it's never easy to try again at something that you've failed at before. And I think that's a sign of courage. Um, because you have to go against your fears and really do something you've never done before. So kudos on that. And yeah, so many questions I had on your answers because I think you touched a fair number of interesting topics. The first question I have is, so you had success at the 100-mile distance um, in your like early days of ultra running. Uh, got fourth at Western State with a really fast time. What keeps you like what makes you want to try and try again at that distance? Because I think a lot of people see you more like a 50K 50-mile short distance specialist because you've had obviously some great performances on that format. But the fact that you keep like wanting to go back to the 100-mile distance probably tells something about the athlete you are. So
Mm.
I guess it's a question that a lot of people have asked you before, but what
Yeah.
is it that keeps you attracting towards that event?
Yeah, I think it's a good question, and there's probably a lot of layers to it, a lot of different reasons. But when I first got into ultra running, one thing that really intrigued me was like seeing how well I could do at the longer distances because I had so much success at the mile in college, and I've
Yeah.
run a fast 800. I think I've run 148 low for 800, and in and then had success 5K half marathon, and so for me it was just like, hey, let's see how far we can take this. Like, can you compete at the top of the game in all these distances? And would you be happy at the end of your running career if like that was something that was like your quote unquote legacy or whatever? And that's always stuck with me. And then when I started to kind of work on myself and my mindset, that didn't seem as important of like what people thought of me when I'm done with all this. Like that's not as big of a deal anymore. But it's gotten to the point to where it's like now for my own self, can I complete these distances at a high level? And plus it's fun. It's like a challenge. I can't stand doing like puzzles or those sort of things. Like like people sit around and put a puzzle together or do a word game or something. I hate that stuff. But for me, running is that like that. And I think trying to figure out these longer distances and having success at that, and even with coaching, it feels very much like a puzzle. And I like those kind of projects, and that's what I look at it as, is like a project and something I can like devote my time and energy towards, and it's fun for me. I really like enjoy trying to figure out the unlock for a 100 miler, and yeah, I just get a lot of like gratification out of that. And yeah, then there's other things that go along with it. I think you can relate to this a little bit too. Our sport, it seems like all the money now is going towards athletes who are having a lot of success at these longer distances, and everybody wants to see people crush 100 milers and long ultra races. And it's hard to be doing this professionally without that in the back of your head, saying like, oh, well, I am really good at 50Ks and some of these sub ultra distances, but if I really want, to survive in this sport, I kind of need to have a little bit of success in the longer races. And while that's not like the like reason for doing these, it is a big part of it. And but that also excites me too, because um, a lot of these 100 mile specialists can't say that they're very good at 50Ks. They just don't have the leg speed or the ability. So for guys like you and I think it's fun to be able to kind of tap into these other distances and have some success. And yeah, that sport. I think that it makes it fun for us.
Yeah. Do you think it's still true in 2024 that in order to be like a full-time professional athlete, you need to be an ultra runner, like a 100-mile racer in the sport? Because I feel like there is a lot more room for people who are focusing on the shorter distances that are just as fun, as competitive, and I mean even more competitive a lot of times than the longer distances. So I feel like compared to a few years ago, there is a better balance between the ultras, like the long ultras, and the sub ultra short distance 50K range. There's a lot more attention towards those races. They're still seen as a like intermediate step transition towards the longer distances in a lot of cases, probably especially in the US. But I think there are big opportunities in the shorter distances as well. Like brands, team managers, teams are starting to incentivize those distances. And I think, at least here in Europe, there is a lot of opportunities for athletes to
Oh yeah.
become like elite professionals in those events.
Yeah, I totally agree with you on that, actually. And just as you're kind of mentioning that, just a list of names were going through my head of athletes who in the U.S. Who are able to make it and make a career out of running shorter sub ultra distances, without even having to touch into 50Ks. And that is super exciting. I think when we first got into the sport, it was like, oh, you want to trail run? Well, if you want to make any money in this sport, you got to go to Western States or you got to run 100 miler. That's definitely changed. I mean, it's there's still in the U.S. especially a lot of attention around those longer races, and with contracts and stuff. Just from what I've noticed and I've seen, it seems like there's way more incentive to perform well at the longer races. Western States is a really big thing here, and
Yeah.
brands want their athletes in it. Like, Rachel Drake is a great example, and this isn't to say this is why she moved up. I think she moved up for her own reasons and stuff. But
Yeah.
Rachel Drake's a great example. She can, I mean, she can do it all, right? She's one of the best runners in the world, but crushing the shorter distances. And then, I mean, how do you ignore the incentives to get into a race like Western States when you see that big fat bonus on your contract and you're good enough to compete with the athletes at the longer distances? And so it's really easy to move up. But couldn't agree more with you. I know, especially in Europe, shorter distance mountain running has always been a big thing, and that's what drew me to the sport initially. I think the first race I ever like noticed in trail running was Sierra Zinal, and Pablo Vigil is a really good friend of mine, and he
Yeah.
asked me like, hey, like you should make the transition into trail, and I was obsessed with short distance mountain running. Watching all the stuff that Matt Carpenter did back in the day, and all the greats, Jonathan White. There's just so many, and then Joe Gray was an awesome kind of mentor in my early years too, and that's the route I wanted to go down, and then you just somehow find yourself like trying to go to the next level in whatever distance that is. And but yeah,
Yeah.
I couldn't agree more. There's definitely room for money and stuff in the shorter distances now, and I love to see it.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess like if you want to make it as a professional, you just have to try to survive and just do the best that you can with the opportunities you get. There is like yeah, a contrast between like from what I see at least in between like what athletes truly want to do, like their talent and their like what they're good at and what makes sense for them to do in training from a technical perspective and where the market wants them to compete. I
Mhm.
think that is often like a contrast. Like I see a lot of people who are training like as sub ultra or like 50K specialists, but who are supposed to race the 100 milers. So it's
Yes.
like a little bit of a contradiction to me. But I understand because the incentives are more in the longer distances. But I think we should try to reverse this narrative and really fight for like better bonuses, better opportunities for the shorter distances, which they're starting to appear.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Couldn't agree more. And they're just as fun for people to follow and watch
oh yeah,
too. I mean, it's cool to sit down and watch a 50K live stream race for just 3 hours rather than having to be on online and waste your whole day at work trying to watch a 15-hour race or something.
yeah. I
But
mean, I don't want to turn this into like a comparison between the ultras and the sub ultra. There is. I love trail running. Like I just love running, regardless of the distance. There are, I think, different features and peculiarities in any distance, and it's like a Sierra is equally interesting as a Western State or a UTMB. So obviously for different reasons. So I don't think we should turn this into like a war game in between like the long and short stuff.
yeah, no, definitely. But that's the cool thing about this sport, man, is
Yeah,
it's I mean, even different than track and field. There's so
yeah,
much variety, so much difference. We know a race like Grand Raid is completely different than a race like Chuckanut, but yet it's the same sport. It's just so
yeah,
freaking cool.
yeah. Trail running is a big umbrella,
It is.
and under this umbrella we have so many different disciplines, and it's actually like many sports because wherever you go, you find, different terrains and different trails and like people running different races and distances. So yeah, I think what makes trail running great, one of the things that makes trail running great is the variety of things that you can do on trails.
Yeah, 100%.
You mentioned that your approach to training has changed a little bit in this last block leading up to Javelina. Um, from what I was able to understand, like it's been less aggressive, like less volume intensive, maybe less intensity focused. Um, what has really changed in your approach to training, like practically? And then I want to talk a little bit about your track background and how that's influenced your approach to pro running training.
Yeah. So this block in particular, I think I kind of went back to doing a few things I had done, way in the past. I've been doing a few more, um, well, so intensity hasn't been super high, but I've been doing more workouts in a week, if that makes sense. So, but the workouts have been very controlled and more at like kind of high end threshold stuff rather than, um, just like killing the body out on like crazy, crazy long runs and things like that. And I've been adding in some workouts in long run days too, but my long runs have been a little bit shorter because of that. So a lot of it is just kind of reminding the body what it feels like to kind of suffer a little bit, work through being a little bit uncomfortable. I think sometimes when you're training for 100 milers, you get stuck just in the mileage game where you want to hit a number every week and the mileage isn't necessarily hard, and you neglect workouts a little bit. It's just like volume, 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 and you forget like, well, racing is still hard. Like you're gonna have to put yourself out there and fight through some uncomfortable, times in the race. And I think the past few 100 mile blocks, I've forgotten that a little bit. I've been so worried about making sure I get the volume in, and volume's been decent this block. Like I've been anywhere from 80 to like 115 miles in the week, just depending, which is good. But like for example, when I was getting ready for UTMB, it was like 130, 130, 130 every week, and hardly any workouts. And this one has been more like 80 miles, 90 miles, 100 miles, 3 workouts in a week, and but controlled, but still feeling like I'm doing something. And it's funny enough, I've had very few days in this block that have actually felt good. Um, the taper weeks I've felt incredible on the weekends. So I think that that's showing something. Where in the past that's usually not the case for me. And so like I did a 50K 2 weeks, 2 weekends ago, I think.
Oh yeah,
And
the one in Oregon, right?
yeah, in Oregon, and I didn't taper for it, but I backed off. I only did one workout that week, and backed off the mileage just a little bit. But it felt incredible, and it was one of the first runs I felt really good in, over the last few months, and so that showed me that what I'm doing is I think working, and the body's responding really well to it, and so but yeah, that was a really eye-opening race because I put out hardly any effort at all and was able to run a pretty decent time for that course, and just it felt really, really under control. And that's how I want to feel in this 100 miler. And so, yeah, it was encouraging. I think just knowing that I had 2 more weeks of training to put in before going into Javelina.
Yeah, awesome.
Yeah.
Um, so given your track background and your talent on like short, like track and field events, I think that's a little bit of a double-edged sword because on one hand, you're obviously very talented and you know what it takes to run certain times. And I think you have like a tool set, like a background that is incredible. Like not many trail runners have that. But on at the same time, I think it can be dangerous to be so fast and so talented, and like to have this like mindset that you have to hit certain paces, you have to like hit certain intensities and mileage and like all the classic track and field metrics that don't necessarily always apply to trail running. So how do you find that balance? Like, do you see it more as an advantage or something that you find yourself fighting against?
Yeah. I would say it's not as big of an issue now in my career. But when I first got into trail running, it definitely was not an advantage. It was something I really, really struggled with.
Because you
And
can turn it into an advantage, of
you
course,
can, yes,
but it's not straightforward. Like even for
right.
me, it's been the same. Like I'm not as fast as you, but I do have a very similar background.
Oh, yeah.
But you can just go out and push, push, push like you would when you're training for a road marathon or like a 5K on the track.
Yeah.
It's, I think there is a lot of, it's a lot about like learning to back off when you are running on trails if you have that same background, I think.
Yeah. I think I'll use cross country as a good example.
Hmm.
When you're running a cross country race, it's short enough where you can push, push, push on varying terrain. So like you'll get to a climb in a cross country race, and you're like, oh, I can push this because I'm not going to be spending enough time out here. Where if I'm spending this much time over threshold, it's going to be detrimental. I still had that mindset when I did my first 50K, and boy, did it come back to bite me and blow me up. And I'm still actually this is something I'm still learning as I go into longer races. Over that, it's like patience is everything in trail running, and it's super hard for a track athlete to have the type of patience you need in a trail race because of the terrain, because of the fueling and the time you're going to be out there and everything like that. And where track background and cross country background, you're able to like if you feel pain, you can push through it knowing that like you can feel the finish line, if that makes sense. And that doesn't exist in trail running because you have another 4 or 5 hours to keep going. And what happens to the body? I mean, it's straight physiology. Like you can't sustain those paces. So and it's funny because for us, these paces feel so slow and easy,
Yeah.
um, because we're naturally gifted at just kind of. I mean, we've worked hard at it, but we can just click off 6 minute miles, and it's not that big of a deal. Where that can get you in trouble over the course of 8 hours or so, 5 hours even. So you have to like run a pace that feels like you can just be out there all day long, knowing that it's not going to feel like that in a few hours. Where if you did that in a track or cross country race, like see you later, like you're just going to get smoked, and there's no point of even lining up. So there is it's a different sport in my opinion, and there's a
Yeah.
different way to approach it. And yeah, I think that's something I had to work on a lot early on in my career, and I think that's why I had success at the shorter mountain stuff right away was because it was sort of like cross country. Like
Yeah.
you could really push the climbs, and like, okay, I'm near VO2, but this is fine. I know I only have 3K of this, and I can just hammer it out, and I'll be done. Where as I've gotten into the ultra distances, though, it's totally different.
Yeah.
And another good example, we saw this at Chuckanut this year when we ran Chuckanut. There were some road guys coming in and running the trail. It was one of their first trail races, and they were all with with you at the up at the front on the bike path at the beginning, and you guys were clicking off at pretty fast miles. And I was like, okay, I'm gonna sit back. I know Fran has the experience and he can keep going, but I'm gonna sit back. When we hit that first climb, they're all gonna come back to me because you can't sustain that pace. It's not a cross country race. It's a 50K, and that's just comes with maturity and doing it a ton.
Yeah. Do you like in terms of the approach to the sport, especially at a pro level, I still feel like I still follow a ton of track and road athletes, and I feel like their approach to the sport is like sometimes way more professional than the trail runner's average approach to the sport. Of course, at professional level, like even, I mean, it's yeah, they're two different sports, and trail running is maybe more relaxed than track and field or road marathoners. Um, but I feel like sometimes we would benefit from having like a more professional approach to the sport, especially by some athletes. What do you think, and what is like something that you wish to see more in our sport in terms of, yeah, that
Totally.
a little
I
professional approach?
I go back and forth on this a lot because on one hand, I love the fact that trail running is kind of a soul sport, and it's kind
Yeah,
of um, free spirited, and there's
dirt
this,
bag. Yeah,
yeah, there's
that's great
more around
for
it.
sure.
Yeah. But at the same time, professionalization of the sport does a lot of good for raising the bar and upping the level of what we're capable of doing. And I think it's okay to have a mix of the two. I think you can do both. And one thing I'm realizing as I get older in this sport is I have to be pretty professional, or else I start to lose these races because these young guys coming in are so talented. And so I was listening to the Single Track podcast with Finn Melanson, and he was interviewing Jason Schlarb. And Schlarb was talking about how he has to do all the little things and act more professional now than he did when he was quote unquote like really a professional runner. And so yeah, I think it's necessary to have all the to be doing all the things to be more professional if you want to continue to grow the sport and to get better. But I would sure hate to see trail running lose the soul aspect of it. And it is a fine balance, man, because I think we do a good job here in Boulder with it, with our little group.
Yeah, exactly.
We like to kind of like have a vibe around it where it's like, yeah, this is still our soul sport, but then at the same time, we're doing what we need to do to
Yeah,
get better.
I think
So yeah,
like I think in order to do things seriously, you don't have to take yourself too seriously. Like you
I
can
agree.
still like compete and have an approach to the sport that is extremely high level, but at the same time, like have fun and like just not take yourself too seriously. Just because I mean, it's running. We're doing it for fun. We're doing because yeah, we're having a good time on trails, and we like to compete and challenge ourselves with races and adventures and all of that. So I agree that the two things can coexist basically.
Yeah, yeah, and I think yeah, there's been a lot of dialogue and talk about how it's got to kind of be one or the other, and I don't believe that.
Hmm.
I don't think there's truth behind that. And I think part of I think having brands behind um, athletes who are, still want to treat trail running as, a soul sport, but also get better and be professional. I think having brands showcase that and, rather than treating it like another road athlete or, trail is special. And so I think as long as they're showcasing trail athletes as special athletes in that way, then that's a good thing. I don't know.
Yeah,
Everybody probably has their opinions on that,
yeah,
but
that's a good point.
yeah, yeah.
What does it mean to you to be professional in your own daily life?
Mhm. Um, for me, it's a lot of it's taking care of the little things. I've been running for 26 years now, at a high level. I started competing when I was 11, and I'd say even when I haven't been a professional athlete, I have been very professional with this. And the reason being is because I love it so much. And when you love something so much, it tends to take up a lot of your headspace and energy. And when something takes up that much space, it becomes very, a professional thing in your life, and you devote a lot of time to it. I would say, same with academics or relationships and things like that. And so for me, if I'm, everything I do in the day, um, if it doesn't have anything to do with running, it still has a lot to do with running. So like,
Yeah.
before I, you know, consume a soda, I'm like, wow, is this going to be good for my running? or if I'm like watching a TV show at night and I'm like, "Ah, I really want to watch another episode, but I should probably get 8 hours of sleep tonight. I'm thinking about my running." So those are the things for me that just those little details is what makes you a professional at it. And then there's things like trying, working on your mindset, and working on things outside of running to make your running better. So a lot of little details, just focusing on the details and you know, as as long as you are having a good time and really love what you're doing, I think it's easy to call yourself a professional at it.
Yeah, agree. On your blog, you wrote something about the importance of prioritizing self-care. And you wrote, it's not a luxury, but it's a necessity, especially when facing adversity. Taking care of ourselves physically, mentally, and emotionally is the foundation of overcoming life's hardships.
Yeah.
Do you want to comment on that? Because I think for me, like, I can relate 100% to what you just explained. And it has to do a lot with prioritizing self-care and prioritizing ourselves. And at the same time, learning to say no, even if it's so hard sometimes, saying no to people and turning down, opportunities, situations, just because we have to prioritize ourselves.
Right. Yeah, I don't know if I can explain it perfectly, but there's a lot of things going on in life and in the world, and um, at the end of the day, it's what you make of it, and like nothing is real except for what's in your head and what you are experiencing yourself. And so when I realized that, I realized, whoa, well then if I'm not like focusing on myself, how does any of this even matter that's going on in the world? And so yeah, the moment I started to really like take the time to focus on my needs and what I really wanted out of life, lo and behold, I was able to be there for people in a way that I hadn't been able to show up for in the past. My running became really enjoyable again, and I was doing it for all the right reasons. Health, was so much better. I think the world is only what you believe it is. Like, it comes from right here in your head. And so I just think that if it all comes from your brain and your experiences and it's your reality, then you should focus on you. And of course that's going to trickle down to being a good person and being there for other people. I think when you meet your own needs, it rubs off on in other aspects of life and makes things much easier. But also easier said than done too. So because that's part of the problem is we are so in our own heads that we think that everything going on in the world isn't our own reality, and it's something completely different, and that's just simply not true.
Yeah.
So that's when I came to that conclusion. It was like, oh wow, I need to like not worry so much about everything else going on, because everything that's going on is just a product of what's going on right in my own head. And then when I realized that, God, so much changed.
Yeah. I like it's hard to fully explain it, but I think I can understand like it's what you make it's your internal dialogue that truly matters and that is critical for running, but also for life and how you see the world, like reality. And I think this is really like when people talk about the ability to truly listen to yourself, it's that inner voice and just the ability to understand like, yeah, basically what you're feeling in that moment, I think.
Yeah, totally. It's we we're blessed to be living beings that like we have all the tools we need to get through life and to be happy and to live whatever existence this is. And I think yeah, once you kind of realize that, it seems silly not to put the focus on your own self, and that's what's going to get you through this life in the most meaningful way. And
I think a
Yeah,
lot of times the fear is that once you do that, you become a selfish person, but
right.
it's not true. Like I think as long as we're not prioritizing yourself, I think as long as we're not like in a good place within ourselves, we can't really be positive towards other people and serve other people in a good way.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it's maybe counterintuitive, but I think I've started to realize more and more the importance of this.
Yeah, yeah, it's something it's important, it's made a huge difference in my day-to-day life. And it's made a huge difference with my running. And even if I don't see it in results, performance results,
Yeah.
I feel it and I feel much better about my running. And but these things also they take a lot of work and a lot of self-reflection and um, it's it's like anything, it's that's part of being professional too. Going back to that statement. So yeah, I don't know. Life is crazy.
Yeah. Cool. Let's recap a little bit your season because there are maybe two or three moments that I want you to reflect on. Um, First, of course, is Chuckanut 50K. We had I mean, such a great race together, and I think, yeah, to this day is probably my best racing memory of the season. Like, it's the race that I'm most proud of. And to have shared it with you felt very, very special. So, just how do you see that race in retrospect? And what do you think about me like running in front of the race the whole time and you trying to catch me?
Yeah. God, I couldn't agree more with you on that being such a special race this year. A few reasons. It was really cool because it was an early season race, and I think neither one of us really knew where our fitness was. But we knew Chuckanut's a really, really, really historical race. There's some of the best runners in the world, definitely the best runners in the US have run that course before. And so it's a good race to do to be like, okay, let's just see where fitness is. And that was my original plan was I was going to go there and I was going to see where my time stacked up to history, and then I was gonna plan the rest of my season out from there. And lo and behold, man, you show up. I think, yeah, and I wasn't nervous for the race because I had no expectations for myself. It's an early season race. I was just coming off of Big Alta where I got completely destroyed by Eli and was like, well, let's just rip another 50K and see where the fitness is and go
I
from
mean,
there
in
for the.
retrospect, that race at Big Alta that Eli won, I mean, then he went on to have a like the perfect season with he won Broken Arrow, then he won OCC. So he's probably like at the moment he's probably the best 50K specialist in the world. So
Yeah,
that wasn't like that wasn't easy for you to like run with him for most part of the race and then eventually losing, but I think it was still a really, really good race.
yeah, yeah, and I think it actually helped me at Chuckanut because you were off the front right from the get go, and I was a little bit more patient at Chuckanut and waited until that first long climb. But the plan was to just keep you in sight the whole time, and hopefully we get on the bike path and we can see who had the most leg speed. Turns out it was you on that day by a lot. But I think you know the memories from that race, yeah, some of them come from the race, but it comes from after the race and just that whole trip out there and um, how meaningful it was that you and I both went under the course record there, and then like what came of that, like that I got confidence from that I haven't had in years in running, and knowing that I was only like a few minutes behind you. You are hands down the best 50K runner. You and Eli are probably the two best 50K runners in the world right now, and so
Thanks.
it was really meaningful for me to be able to be that close to you on such a historical race, and it was just kind of like it was such a perfect day. I think the event is amazing. Christy Mule puts on just an incredible event. It's one race. Everybody goes out, runs 50K on this course that's been around forever, and some amazing trails. And then, yeah, it's just I don't know, such a cool experience, such a good time, um, and it's always fun. Even though we weren't like neck to neck the whole time, it did feel like a battle, and those are the
Yeah,
races I remember most too. And when you get the most out of each other, that's the type of respect that you can't get in any other setting in life. And so, yeah, that
100%.
for a fun weekend, and then yeah, and then you come into Boulder after that and getting to hang out and train a little bit. That was fun too. So
Yeah.
set the tone for the rest of the year.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, I mean, we definitely knew each other before Chuckanut, but then I think the experience created a connection among us, and that was really really cool. Yeah, I love. It doesn't happen that often, but when it happens, it's pretty cool.
I,
Um, and then you had another really good race at the Gorge Waterfalls. That was another good one. You got the win. Um, lowered the course record, and then you went on to Canyons 100K. That felt like kind of like the watershed of the season of your season when things started to derail a little bit. I think you got sick before the race, and then what really happened?
yeah, man, that was such a frustrating weekend. I went into Canyons feeling kind of on top of the world, like unstoppable. The momentum was going, and
Yeah,
of course, better because this happens more times than not when things are going well. You can't expect them to keep going well in this sport. But I started feeling kind of off the day before the race, but I just kind of chalked it up to be maybe like a little bit of nerves. It was a golden ticket race, so there's a lot of pressure on those. And then yeah, during the race, I kid you not, like 2 miles in, I couldn't even get I just couldn't even run with the top 10 guys. Like I just felt so bad. And then probably 10K in, I started vomiting and throwing up and having stomach issues, and then just full body shutdown. Like I mean, some of the worst I've ever had in a race, where I just like no energy, couldn't even put a foot in front of the other, and ultimately it was like I'm wasting my time by finishing this race and probably setting myself back if I do. Dropped out, and then so I dropped out at, I don't know, a little after 50K, I guess, into that race, and yeah, and then the next day, tested positive for COVID. So I don't know, I must have had like a stomach bug and COVID, and it all kind of came to a head on one day, which was really unfortunate because I put a lot of my eggs in that basket, and I was very thankful UTMB let me into that race last minute. And I just felt like it was embarrassing. We all have those moments that feel pretty like they're gut wrenching, feel kind of embarrassing. And whether people think it or not, you put that kind of pressure on yourself, and it's
yeah.
just like, I don't know what to do now. And yeah, I was pretty frustrated after that, but I also at the same time was able to let it go really quickly because
Mm.
I knew, well, it's like, well, my body just wasn't responding. Like there's nothing I could do about it. I was sick. Whereas if I wasn't sick, that would have been a much harder pill to swallow.
Yeah, yeah. I think. I mean, it's easy to be kind with ourselves when everything is going great and you're performing well, winning races, and everybody's praising you. And it's a lot harder to love yourself and be okay with yourself when things are going wrong and you start having like bad results and maybe you get injured and you can't do what you love.
Mhm.
I think I still find that roller coaster that is basically the life of a professional runner so
Right.
difficult to navigate. Um, and I think, I mean, I've had that a lot in the past, especially before this year. This year was probably one of my best. Like I didn't get injured. Most of my races were great or at least okay. So I don't know, like yeah, obviously I worked hard for this, but I feel super grateful that everything was pretty good on average. Maybe for you it was different because like you had a really good first part of the season, and then I think you struggled a lot since canyons and then through the summer, and there was probably a lot of self-doubt and uncertainty
Yeah,
within that time.
definitely so. Yeah, I think sometimes it's hard to get the ball rolling again after you have a performance like that. And you talked about how like, you had a pretty good year this year, but that didn't come, the past maybe it was last year. You had your struggles with injury and things too, and so you're totally right. I think that's it's just the cycle of being a professional athlete and an ultra runner is we're going to go through bouts of unless you're Courtney Dauwalter, you're going to go through bouts of like um, good days and bad days, and you know you're I always like to say like the runner you are is who you are on your best days,
Yeah.
because ultimately that is what that is you. And the bad days, like it's just preached so much, they don't define us, they
Yeah, we
suck.
can like we get to choose what days, what races define ourselves as athletes for sure.
Right.
Like we are our best data points, I think. And at the end of the day, nobody really remembers the bad days. I mean, they're part of your background. I think they can teach you a lot, but like nobody's going to judge you for a bad day or a bad race or whatever. So I think to let go of this pressure is very freeing, it's very important.
Yeah, it is. And that all goes back to like, years of working on myself and trying to to get to that
Yeah.
point. But it's a hard thing to do. It's
Yeah,
we
yeah. It's not like something that you want. You just tell yourself, okay, let's put it behind. Let's forget about this day. It doesn't it doesn't work that way. It doesn't you can't take it for granted, I think. So there is a lot of work to do on ourselves on that
definitely,
side.
yeah, yeah, so true.
Have you reflected on like what went wrong after canyons and why you like maybe things started to spiral and it felt like you were in like a negative, just a negative period that you had a hard time getting out of?
Yeah, I have a lot actually. Some of it was to do with okay, cannons didn't go well. I was hoping it would go well, and then I was like, okay, I'll be in Western States, and that'll be the focus for 2025, or sorry, for the rest of the
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 year.
summer 2024. And so yeah, that didn't go well, and then it was like, okay, time to pivot. Leadville is what I want to do, and then I listened to a lot of the wrong people, and um, probably instead of listening to my own intuition about what I wanted to race and what I wanted to do, um, kind of was, I guess, convinced not to run it. And I really, I don't want to have regrets. And I don't like using that word regrets because I think good things always come out of even things that you don't end up doing that you want to do. But I was upset at myself for not doing what I had planned on doing, and instead shifted over to doing Sierras and all, which I've run Sierras and all twice before, and I know you have to be in a particular type of fitness for that race, and in definitely the right headspace for that race, and I wasn't there, and I think reflecting on it, a lot of it was due to kind of the training and life stuff going on, and just not really being happy with the setting I had made for myself, and so I was like, okay, like. Um, I'm just going to see what comes of this. And sure enough, like that race went terribly. And it was after that race, I was like, okay, time to make the changes that I know I need to make. And don't worry about whose feelings you're hurting or what. Like, again, focus on yourself and good things will come of it.
Prioritize
And
yourself. Yeah,
I did it
that's it.
and started just training so well again and feeling good again and it wasn't like overnight, you know. It took the whole time I was in Chamonix. A lot of people don't. Oh, I didn't race while I was there, but the whole time I was there was basically time to focus on me and get back to like what I felt like I needed to be doing and the way I needed to be thinking and feeling and that sort of thing. And oh, it was such a good trip to have um, and I've felt really good about where things are at since then. We'll see if the results, you know, speak to it. But you know, I was able to have a pretty good race last weekend, and then Javelina. You know, we'll see what happens. But you don't get here without reflecting on all that, and so I think
Exactly.
it makes sense. You know, you'd ask that, and um, there's probably so much more that I reflected on and came to the conclusion of. But at the end of the day, it was just like I wasn't happy with how I was training and running and thinking, and that needed to change. Yeah.
Do you need are you someone that you need like the validation of a race result in order to feel content and happy with your path, your journey? Like, you know, Javelina may go well or may not. Like
Yeah.
you never know how the day is gonna be. But regardless of that, I think the last couple of months, from what you're telling me, have been very positive. So I think any result cannot cancel the good things that you've done in the past couple of months. But a lot of times, like after a bad race, it feels like everything is canceled by that bad result. So how do
Right.
you navigate this dynamic? What is that
Yeah.
like
I'd
for you?
say definitely in the past, I definitely needed that result to feel a certain way and or whatever. But again, I think this just comes with maturity and doing enough races and having enough good results and bad results to change your mindset. But it's not going to define you know the rest of the year coming up or how I feel about training or racing or how I feel about myself. I think I'm at a point now where yeah, it'll sting, and I'll probably be kind of upset or bummed about it if it isn't a good day for a few days. But I'm gonna get right back on the horse and focus on what's next. You know, there's a lot of races I want to do, and I think what it comes down to, Fran, is at the end of the day, I know that like I'm gonna have good races and bad races. It's how you where you put the pressure. Like I put a lot of pressure on myself for canyons because I felt like I had to be back in Western states, and I shifted the mindset of I don't have to be back in Western states. That's just the icing on top. If I do get to go back to Western states, I would love that, but that doesn't define me, or that's not going to help me get a contract anymore. And if it does, that's not a healthy way to live, you know. And so I'm excited about the opportunity of like well, if Javelina goes well and I get into states, awesome. Can't wait. If it doesn't go well, I'm excited for the opportunity to run other races that I maybe wouldn't do otherwise, and get to focus on those. And that's a lot of what this last year was just running races I've always wanted to do, like Chuckanut. I never run Chuckanut. Always wanted to do that, and I wanted to go out to Chamonix and not race this year and just hang out. And I've always wanted to go do that during the weekend and cheer people on. And so got to do that. And yeah, so I don't know if this answers your question, but that's kind of where I'm
Yeah,
at with like validation from results and stuff. It's not as big of a deal as it used to be.
awesome. Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a sign of maturity for sure. It's taken me a lot to accept that, and maybe I'm just saying this because yeah, my last year of results have been pretty satisfying. And again, it's a lot like it's way harder to feel okay with who you are and like what you do, like your races or your results and everything when things are not going the way you expect that you want. So
Yeah.
again, it's always this balance, I think, that we're navigating. Um, cool. So I mean, best of luck for Javelina, and we're we'll be following you. We're stoked to see you. what you can
Yeah,
do.
I appreciate it. Yeah,
Yeah,
it'll be fun. It's always an adventure doing loops around the desert.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Party.
Yeah,
To go towards the end of our conversation, I wanted to ask you about the experience with the Boulder Boys show because I think that's a super fun, super interesting project. I mean, it's not it's not very common that like pro athletes, elite athletes, start a project like that. Like usually is, pro athletes do interviews with different medias and podcasts and stuff, but to have a space where you have like the conversation you would have on trails when you're, out there training with the other Boulder boys, and to bring that to share that with other people, I think is pretty cool. And I think I really like this idea of like a better connection between the professional side of the sport and the amateur athletes and fans also, because distance running is like this peculiar sport where the professional athletes and the recreational runners get to stand on the same start line, at least in most races. And that's something really cool about our sport. And I still feel there is a little bit of a gap between us elite athletes and everyone else, and that this gap is maybe too big sometimes. Like people have a hard time understanding that we're humans, just like everyone else. Like we just run a little bit faster than the others, but we go through the same things. We have like the same problems, the same lifestyle at the end of the day. Like we're no different to other people. And there is probably like a handful of reasons for this situation. I think it's a little bit like how the sport has developed, the narrative that's been used by the media, and maybe other things. But I really like how you're breaking this barrier, um, contributing to breaking this barrier with the show, the Boulder Boys show.
yeah,
Um, how do you see this dynamic? And yeah, just talk a little bit about the project and your relationship with Moy, Seth,
yeah.
Drew, and
Adam, yeah,
Adam. Yeah,
yeah. Oh man, um, it's it happened pretty organically, which was really cool, and I think says a lot about what we're doing. But yeah, we run together a lot, our little group of friends, and we get together a lot for dinners. You got to experience that when you were here, which
yeah,
was awesome to have. Anytime friends are in town, you get to join us for brunch or dinners with the wives and the Boulder boys and all that. And um, we were doing this on a daily and weekly basis, and we were having these conversations on runs that. So here's the thing. I think a lot of people when you're running with a group of friends, it's really special because you don't have your phone, you're not out on your phones, there's no distractions, you're just in the woods and you have real meaningful conversation and you get to know somebody on a personal level so quick. And I think and it's all organic conversation, which is always fun. And I think we realized really quickly that that is something that was missing in the running space. Is like being able to bring that to everybody. So we thought like, hey, let's get a podcast and let's just go on there and just talk as if we would be during a run, and let it be kind of just wherever the conversation goes, it goes. We're going to be honest. We're not going to sugarcoat anything. We're not going to act like we are what people would think of as professional athletes in an
yeah,
interview setting or whatever. We're just going to be us. And then we were trying to think of like how can we like we wanted people to go out on runs, listen to our podcast, and feel like they're out running with us in the middle, in the conversation. And so we were like, how can we bring people in together? And thought about like some radio shows back in the day would have call-ins and stuff, and we decided to do the voice memos where people could call in and ask us questions, and we'd answer it, hoping that people would understand really quickly. We're no different, we are the
yeah,
same as you, and we have the same thoughts, and we like to joke around, we may have opinions that you don't agree with, and you may have opinions that we don't agree with, but none of that matters. We're just going to have a good time and talk about running or whatever else it is in life that we want to talk about. And it's going to be unfiltered. And it was kind of a shot in the dark, man, because that's a scary thing to do is being unfiltered in the public eye as a professional athlete. And I think it's been taken pretty well. I'm sure there's people that don't like us or whatever, but for the most part, it's been really fun, and it's a way for us. It's just another reason for us to get together and have another group setting. We always order pizza every night we do it, and we'll sit there and eat snacks and eat pizza and just start recording, and it's a great time. Typically we'll go out on a run before, and like a night run on the trails or something, and then we'll record our podcast. But it's become kind of just a fun little ritual, and yeah, it's been frustrating this last few months. We've all been really busy with a lot of life stuff going on, so we haven't gotten to record as much as we want to. But I think we're about to get back onto a steady recording schedule, and yeah, get back to doing that more often. But that's kind of how it came about. I love it. It's fun, and we'll probably continue doing it as long as we're all able to. So
Yeah, yeah. I think the fact that it's like unfiltered and relatable makes it special and unlike any other podcast because yeah, I don't think I found other similar shows. So yeah, I listened to all the episodes. Has there ever been some backlash or like some controversial things that you maybe talked about on the podcast and people, reached out or like got angry at you?
yeah, yeah, there has, and that's to be expected. I think
Yeah.
everybody shares their own opinions, and that's fine. We don't care. It's our podcast, right? But at the same time, we don't want to make anybody feel super uncomfortable. But I think actually it was the episode you were on, which I highly recommend your listeners to go listen to it. It was great having you on. We were talking about Barkley, and I
I
think
mean, yeah, I do say I do have some controversial opinions for sure.
oh yeah, we all do.
We all do.
That's
Like
the human.
I'm just like I think as long as they are expressed in a respectful way, it's fine. Like as
Yeah,
long as you respect other people, you can have any opinion you want. So
yeah,
generally, like I'm not afraid to express myself, and that's why sometimes like I'm perceived as a controversial person. Um, but yeah, I remember
why
that
you
quote
have
about the Barkley.
yeah, but it's also, I think it's why you have a great following and a huge fan base, and people do love you, respect
Thanks.
you, is because of that. So I think the minute you stop being yourself to try and please other people, that never turns out well.
Yeah,
And
exactly. Like we don't need to necessarily please the others all the time. Like we may agree or disagree with other people, and that's fine. But as long as we respect each other, I think
totally,
it's important to listen to different voices and different people.
yep, I agree. It's how we all learn and progress in the world.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Awesome. So on to the next Boulder Boy show.
yeah, that's right.
You there. Thanks, Matt. It's been fun to talk to you, and good luck with your taper for Javelina. And we'll definitely be following you.
Yeah, I appreciate it, man. Looking forward to following you, and I hopefully you're getting some rest now after a big season. All right,
Yeah. Take care.
thanks for having me.
Bye.